Welcome to Leadership Unplugged, a podcast series which travels with remarkable leaders and understands their journeys through their struggles and challenges. I am Rajeshwari Krishnamurthy from Great Lakes Institute of Management, and I'll be your host for this series. We have with us today Ms. Geetanjali Chugh Kothari, Chief Marketing Officer of Future Generali India Life Insurance. Her journey has been nothing short of remarkable, and she's broken many conventions and norms to reach where she has reached today. Welcome, Geetanjali, to this podcast series.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to dive right into the first question. Brand management has never been easy, right? So, in the last decade or so, where we've seen multiple changes in the consumer landscape by way of fast reducing attention span, multiple touch points for decision making, and in a sector like insurance, how do you cope up with all of this and still build a brand?
Well, I think at the heart of it, whichever industry that you're part of, you need to know your consumer and you need to know what drives them, what motivates them, what pains them, what are the insights, right? Only if you know your consumer well will you be able to engage with them, and will only then will he or she will be able to consider you and eventually purchase, right? So how is it that we understand that who is it that we're talking to? We conduct a lot of researches. We spend a lot of time understanding who the customer personas are, what is it that we can offer to them, and at the end of it, all of us want, especially because it's life insurance, the focus is towards helping them better the lifestyle and helping them provide the peace of mind that they really need. At the end of it, everything that we're doing for our family and our loved ones, right? Whether it's wealth creation or whether it is protection in case of any eventuality. So there are obviously it's a process that we follow very meticulously to understand who we are talking to. Then we get into the design stage of what we have to say to eventually be able to create what is it that we have to offer.
So, insurance is a tricky industry. I mean, you've been with BFSI for 20 odd years, but insurance, I think, because you're dealing with risk management and talking about morbidity several times, how do you kind of, bring to the table the required emotion that is, needed to make a difference? And therefore, how does your organization stand out or differentiate itself amongst competition here?
So, see, I also want to talk about the work that the industry has done in this. There are within life and insurance, general insurance and life insurance and standalone health insurance companies. There are over 55 companies that are operating in the country right now. And each of us obviously have the same struggle, same challenges, same opportunities. All of us have been trying to speak to the consumer in the language that they understand best. Sometimes it is emotional, sometimes it is comical as well, because we must also understand it's a product that you require right from the day you start earning, because you have the potential to save for a better future, and save for your family all the way until you retire, because there are two kinds of risks that we look after. One is risk of living too short and the other is risk of living too long. We all know that the age span also has increased. Earlier when the average lifespan used to be around 66, 67, we're easily talking about 76, 78 with advanced medical sciences. So to ensure that you live a life of dignity, and you have enough with you until your last days, which could be difficult as well because of medical exigencies, etc., we ensure that every risk in that sense is covered. Which is why the point that I made earlier on personas becomes very important, because not one size fits all. Some people understand the emotion behind looking after a family. They've seen some difficult times, some incidents amongst their friends' family, right, which they resonate better with. And then there is a very different generation that we otherwise speak to. Millennials understand a different language. There is money at the surplus. There are dreams to be fulfilled. Every year they want to go and travel the world. And we're seeing the number of the travelers also across the world that has increased. And Gen Z is now coming into the fold, right? Which understands a very different language. Their motivations are different. Their requirements are different. So going about therefore, in my last campaign also, I have was in my previous campaign, we had Vidya Balan as our brand ambassador, we used her as a voice of reason. We used her as a slightly older peer who would give advice. In before that, I have used Bollywood songs and made use satire as one of the modes. Before which there have been times that we've used a very emotional route with somebody who's extremely pained, can't is going helter skelter to get the money that is rightfully hers. So ultimately, you can't say it's just that one style that works. It's a whole host of things, and I must appreciate the work that even the industry is doing in this space. Yeah.
There is a lot of emphasis after the advent of social media on performance marketing. And I'm sure the key question on every CEO's mind is, what is a return on my marketing investment, right? So can you tell us about the challenges and the struggles you faced in justifying return on marketing investment?
Well, I'm amazed that you picked this up because yes, these are the conversations we have in the boardroom every day. To be honest, at least now the CEOs very clearly understand the power of brand and brand building. Brands take years and decades to build, right? We've seen examples where just one jingle, Nirma for example, has been around for what, half a century now. Yeah, and that's something. I mean, it plays somewhere we know what brand it is. Many a times it's important that we disconnect the immediate ROI a certain campaign can bring versus what it is also doing to your brand. Obviously, there are very clear funnels and messages that we look after. There's very clear top of the funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel campaigns also that we run. Each of them defines their objectives very clearly. Sometimes when and since the objectives are defined very clearly, we track engagement for certain campaigns. On certain campaigns, we track conversion. I mean, even in the terms, so and not just conversion, but every step of the way is accounted for. If I run a campaign, how many leads did I get? If from the leads that I got, how many people were even interested to meet? From the ones we met, how many converted? So every step of the way is tracked because uh, it's not just necessary that if a campaign gives me some exponential number of leads, will those leads, all leads convert and all leads are great. We've had those issues as well. So one has to measure every aspect of where the money is going. On the other hand, engagement is extremely crucial because not the category is such you don't just wake up one day and you want to buy insurance, right? In India right now, insurance and policy density is still a number that is very small. In markets outside, everybody has 3 to 5 policies. In India, it's just 1 point something. You will be, I'm sure you're aware, it's a terribly under-penetrated category. At the same time, the ones who have insurance are also underinsured.
Right.
So it's not that they have sufficient cover. So both of these are important, where we engage the customer, where we make them aware of the nuances of the category, of the need of the category, and eventually we would want them to convert, of course.
See, I think one of the key challenges facing brands today is to move away from only short-term thinking.
Yes.
See, while the drive on numbers and analytics are pushing us to be more efficient, brand building happens in the medium to long term.
Yes.
It cannot be really captured by the numbers. The story is not entirely told by the numbers. So how do you guard yourself against too much of short-term thinking while still keeping the long-term interest of the brand in mind?
See, I'd say that you cannot guard yourself and one shouldn't also.
Okay.
Because whatever said and done, you also have to safeguard business in the here and now, right? There are sales teams that you have to enable, you have to support. So in my case specifically, and I think every brand lead does it in that sense, every marketing lead does it, that you divide your entire portfolio into two aspects. One is how are you going to support your distribution today for the short term, for the annual plan that they are working on, right? And help them maximize their top line. At the same time, the other half you have to focus on your slightly longer term goals. What are your 12, 18, 36 months looking like? So, and both have to go in tandem. Also because reality is, lately at least the industry has become extremely dynamic also. The regulators become extremely active. So, many a times we've had to even modify our long-term goals. There are conversations on mergers and acquisitions going on that change your course. So it both have to go hand in hand.
So I'm coming to a very touchy topic called brand loyalty. Is loyalty a thing anymore, or how do you measure loyalty in your organization?
Well, so loyalty, the way we measure it, if the customer has bought more than once from you. It's a very clear number, and I'm proud to say I'm working in an organization that tracks it meticulously from our head office. And we operate in 50 plus countries. And in for every market, it's a very important KPI that how many customers have bought more than once. It's not just about continuing to be with you, how many friends you'll refer, but has the customer bought more than once? Yes, made a purchase once again. So that it becomes a very important barometer. I say loyalty exists in an insurance industry, in a life insurance industry, especially. Loyalty definitely exists because this category exists. The reason of existence of this category is claims, right? And at the end of the day, we all want to ensure that this is a product that we don't use, a family will use in case of an eventuality, right? This is what it is, the true reason why it is bought for. Obviously, people live through, right? And that's when they get the maturity claims. We help them obviously achieve their dreams as well. But the assurance that we provide, the relationships that we build, the lifetime partners that uh, we are with them in every step of the way, every journey, every milestone, every good, bad, ugly of their life. And we obviously guarantee that we'll be there if something were to happen. And that brings us loyalty. We, in fact, loyalty is also measured by renewals. I mean, the in this industry was struggling to get the renewal numbers up for the longest time. And since a very long time, we've had extremely healthy renewal rates as well. And the focus is that customers keep coming back to us for more, because what you buy today will not be sufficient for you for say 3-4 years later. And that's another point that I want to highlight, that all of us as consumers of life insurance also must revisit our portfolios every 3-4 years, because if you add more loans, then you require more coverage. If your child suddenly decides to not study in the country but go abroad, and you realize that there's a certain amount of money that you must safeguard, you must revisit your portfolio. We also need to understand that this product especially has no competition in market. A mutual fund, a bank account, stocks, everything can be compared by way of return, right? Insurance, however, is the money that is committed to you the day you sign the check. It's not a corpus you need to build. Today, if you say you want to get covered for 5 crore, you sign it. God forbid something happens the next day, you get that 5 crore. Versus, say, even a mutual fund or stocks, which is very happening right now, and everybody wants to obviously put the money in it. You have to build a corpus. You have to live with the volatility of the industry that it comes with.
One of the things I saw in your website was your emphasis on inclusive leadership, and I know how important it is to have a sales team which is inclusive and both genders, etc. So, in terms of decision making on this product, can you tell us a little bit about who actually takes the call on which insurance to buy, and how does that feed into your organization's strategy of employee recruitment and training, etc.
I'm so glad you picked it up, because this has been an agenda very close to the entire management, especially since more than a year. So there are multiple aspects of this, and I will run out of time if I keep talking about it. But this is something I'm also extremely passionate about. So one reality is that there are more and more women workforce. There are more and more women that are joining the workforce, right? Anyone who joins the workforce has an earning capacity, has a family to take care of, has dreams to take care of, must pick up insurance. For us, it is simply about you have an earning, you must safeguard it, right? We do not differentiate who's buying, uh, except the fact that the needs are different, right? We will offer coverage to men and women both. As a matter of fact, it's amazing and surprising that women lives, uh, the premium rates are cheaper, so they're encouraged more because they live a certain different lifestyle. They're exposed to relatively limited risks, and of course there's a whole actuarial sciences that works on it, so it comes cheaper to women. So it's an added advantage, right? Of course, there are other realities in terms of critical illnesses, which are different for both men and women, which get which one can add on depending on who you are and what you want at that point of time in life. On the recruitment, while this is on selling, and data proves it, our own data proves it, that the number of buyers, of women buyers in our organization also as customers has increased tremendously in the last 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
The reasons are obviously far too many. It's about financial awareness, financial independence. We all went through COVID together. So that was also another huge inflection point. And it is the disposable income as well. Ultimately, a woman also wants to contribute to the growth of the child in the house, wants to provide a better life to the family, right? So that's there from a buyer standpoint. As an organization, we are extremely conscious to get more women on board as both employees as well as sellers. We have seen, and data proves it yet again, that the attrition under women managers is better. The teams flourish more, and I'm talking only employees right now. And the kind of connect that they have is so much deeper. I mean, there's clearly so much more empathy within the team. And we've seen that those teams flourish, more productivity is higher, all of that. On the other hand, we're also recruiting more sellers because we've again realized that as a seller, if a woman comes to you, you will trust her more with money. Not, I'm obviously not touching the topic of financial advice, but just money, you will trust a woman more over a man. This is an industry that's plagued, unfortunately, with a lot of mis-selling and misinformation. However, uh, and unfortunately frauds as well. However, the number of women, number of cases reported against women are so much lower than against men. With that, I also want to very proudly talk about an initiative that we launched last year. It's called Women in Insurance.
Okay.
And we looking at all of this and the fact that we all feel so passionately about this, what we realized was, of course, times are changing. How is it that you can bring more women into the workforce using their strengths in terms of being absolutely creative, being able to build that connect, etc., and build a camaraderie with the person that they're selling to, using a platform that is native to all of these, all of us now, which is digital. So what we have therefore done is we go to campuses, we recruit MBA graduates, girls only. They're native to digital. Uh, we are sort of creating content influencers with them.
Right.
They put out content on social media, generate leads, and go and close them. So, and this channel started July last year. It's doing wonders for all of us. There's so much learning, both from as a seller standpoint, as a consumer standpoint, the kind of products that sell, the whole journey. It's been eye-opening and extremely rewarding.
Excellent. I mean, I'm so glad to hear this. At Great Lakes, we have a Center for Women's Leadership.
Wonderful.
The objective of that is to really help women succeed at workplace.
Super.
Through training programs, refreshers, sabbaticals, and training the organization to be more sensitive. But I think you're living out a lot of things that we preach in educational institutions.
No, absolutely. There's another reality. See, the product is such that while we say that the man is a decision maker, the family composition is also now changed. It's a joint decision. Never, and especially because the money and the involvement, it's a high involvement product. The conversations are done together in a living room. It is never a man who will just sign a check for the next 15 years sitting in his office.
Right.
So it's a composite discussion.
So coming back to this, inclusive leadership, what I spoke about. So you are an example and inspiring for many women out there who would like to tread the corporate career path, which we all know is not easy, right? So what have been your trade-offs, your challenges? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Well, it's an exciting journey that I've been on. And obviously, when I first started, I did not know I'll be sitting here. I'm just glad that I am. And I'm grateful for all the opportunities that came my way, for all my mentors that helped me become what I have today. And mentorship is of, I think, two kinds. One is, what are you learning on the job about the job? Yeah, one is the whole functional piece, because all of us agree that while of course foundationally things are the same, but looking at the environment, there is so much that has changed in the last 5 years. We did not know social media was to become what it has, but we all have to learn and new skills and ensure that we ace them. And the other aspect is we are different people in different walks of life, right? So what is it that you want to be at work? Who do you bring yourself as at work? Of course, we all are authentic, but there are some natural sides of ours that must ply more versus certain natural styles which should be less, which will help you succeed, which at the same time which will help you connect better. So it's been a learning curve for me as well. And I think every organization, every boss, my peers, I've learned tremendously from each of them.
So I think one of the things that research also talks about, whether it's McKinsey or Catalyst, there's enough research out there to say that organizations with women at the helm and leadership positions, not only do they have better return on equity, better attrition rates, like you said, they also have long nurtured customer relationships, and therefore better profitability, etc. So it simply makes more business sense to recruit women. It's not a favor that we are doing them, right? So that's another thing. So if there were like one or two things, Geetanjali, which you would like to share as turning points or pivots in your life, which you took those crucial decisions at the right time, which one would you talk about?
I never said no to opportunities.
Okay.
Many a times I wasn't very confident whether I'll be able to pick it up or not.
Yeah.
But I think just saying yes to an opportunity
Yeah.
is the way to go. You pick it up and then you figure how to go about it.
Yeah.
But at least say yes. I mean, one, if you have faith in yourself, you'll sail through. But what's the worst that can happen, right? And I, while of course they say corporate is cutthroat and the people who make it difficult for you, I honestly did not even face so much of that. Because I think people generally also want to help,
Yeah.
right? If they see you struggling, barring the ones who are generally busy, I don't think there is malice anywhere. Others will be there to lend you their support, and everybody means well. So it's a family that we all work with together, right? I mean, we spend the maximum hours at work. So just say yes to the opportunities that come by, and go with it.
So, I mean, just hang in there, really.
Yes.
Time will come.
Yes.
Time will come.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, which is something that I'm in fact trying to learn because that's not my natural self. Never go into a shell. Because the moment you do, it's not good for you. It's not good for somebody else. You're just whiling away time. It doesn't help anyone. You have to go have a conversation no matter how difficult it is. And many a times we just end up overthinking too much, especially as women, unfortunately. We just overthink situations and we pull ourselves back.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to be around people who have helped me break that shackle. Um, Unfortunately, there are times I do spiral back, but yes, the moment I realize it, I bounce back as well. Because your natural style also tends to take over. But it's very important to have conversations.
So, I mean, glass ceiling is something that all of us have heard of, but academia talks about another concept of glass cliff, which is essentially the really difficult assignments are given to women, and it's a kind of a testing strategy on how much can you hold on and for you to get into the leadership positions. So, have there been any such for you where you thought an assignment was particularly difficult, where you had to prove yourself in order to go ahead?
See, there are different kind of challenges that exist. But the one that you highlight is something that I haven't come across personally or have seen my other women leaders also go through, because I think the culture is driven from the top, from the board, from the CEO. I haven't seen examples even in the last so many years of me working and having women leaders as mentors as well, who addressed this bias that they were specially given a difficult task to prove their worth. I think everybody is treated equally so far as work is concerned.
Okay.
But yes, there are other challenges that we can otherwise speak about in terms of boardroom presence, in terms of have to over explain yourself, in terms of mansplaining. That's definitely a big one. Uh, and aggression, etc. Uh, because men tend to put their point across a little more aggressively versus women. So, but in terms of work and assignments, I do not have any examples for myself or even many other women leaders that I at least am aware of.
A couple of other things come to my mind during my Unilever experience. See, women have this innate need to be liked as well as they're ambitious. Men don't care whether they're liked or not. They just want to be ambitious and they just go for it, So this is a kind of a double bind for women. We want to be liked as well as, because we don't like to be called too aggressive or, we're very bothered about what people think about us, and that actually pulls us down or.
Absolutely, because for some reason, aggression is also construed as go-getter attitude, which may not always be the case. You don't always have to be aggressive person to be an ambitious go-getter as well. I mean, if I talk about my industry, the leading organization right now, the most successful organization right now, has had a woman CEO for more than 10 years. That's HDFC Life.
Yeah, that's true.
Vibha. So there are many such examples. But it's like I said, it's just about sensibility in the boardrooms. Yeah.
And also, I think women have this confidence gap, because I think if with the same qualification and experience, if a job profile is opened, a man, even if it is like 65-70% ready, he would just go out and apply for the position. A woman, even if she's 95% ready, she'll think and think and think. She will not apply for it because she's saying, I lack that 5%. And she will not negotiate for a pay or a promotion. So, I mean, what do you think can be done about this?
I think that's years and years of conditioning, Rajeshwari. It's just very difficult for us to get out of it in a snap. It will require at least those many, or if not those many, but half the number of years of reconditioning to get out of it. We will have to tell ourselves again and again every morning,
Right.
and each other. In fact, we've created a community at work called She Rise, where women managers get together every month to talk about their concerns, challenges, family, etc. And you can't be more right. I mean, we do hold ourselves back even if we know that we are better. Because there is always some fear of losing something, losing your, I don't know, the job or being criticized. And that's not something that we like, right? Yeah, because the emotional impact is much higher. We tend to kind of take it upon ourselves that is our ability being questioned, and which impacts our confidence as well. So this definitely is a concern. I do want to help other women managers who are now getting into the workforce to think more freely and not let everything impact you the way it has been impacting us since I don't know how many years now.
So we have a lot of women students who do MBA at Great Lakes, and we have one of the highest women to men ratio in terms of student profile. So they'll be obviously very happy to hear from you. What are a couple of things that they can take away from a woman leader in corporate today?
I definitely want to highlight the point to them that please say yes to opportunities.
Right.
And please make your voice and presence heard. There are no shortcuts to either of these.
Right.
And ultimately, a man also gets more assignments because he is right there in front of the eyes. It does make a difference.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lovely. That was really, delightful to reside. Thank you so much. Yeah.